call our meeting to order. It's 5:33 or so. And the roll call will show Ager and Minix are here. We will be Larkspur Landing Property Standing Committee to discuss the ultimate use of the Larkspur Landing property, which is owned by taxpayers in Lost Valley. We welcome tonight Larkspur Mayor Larry Chu and Catherine Wade, council member from.
Vice Mayor.
We have two of our elected officials in Larkspur here this evening. Our staff is, of course, our Executive Director, Greg Norby, who's now been with us a year and a half, long, year and a half, there we go. So this is the new Ross Valley Cemetery District. And we have also Director Michael Bornstein with us this evening, and he can't be here as a, you know, he's not making a quorum for the whole board, but he's here just as an observer. To also inform himself as to what's going on here, and it'll be a learning experience for all of us tonight. So we have an approval of the agenda that was distributed. Is there a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
And I'll second that motion. Any comments on this agenda that's been distributed? Does anyone have any comments or questions? If not, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, none, so the agenda is approved. Item number 3, and it's got a lot of pieces to it. Discussion and direction on properties, current status, and potential for future uses. So under A, we've got the review of the current site. We're going to try to go through this fairly quickly because it's Friday night. We were having difficulty finding a night when we could get folks to actually congregate, come to this meeting with the holidays coming upon us. And so we apologize for dragging you on a Friday night, but we're going to try to get you out here at 7:30 tonight so we can get home and do what needs to be done on a Friday night. So item A is review of current zoning status of 2000 Larkspur Landing Circle, mixed use residential and hotel, as per City of Larkspur ordinances 948, 951, and 954. I can just, it's pretty simple. This is a result of previous applications by the Ross Valley Sanitary District for general plan amendment and zoning, and there was a contingent sale done a number of years ago, and the property went through a process with the City of Larkspur. There was a precise plan. I'm not sure the precise plan was actually approved, but it was there before the City of Larkspur. That was going to allow about 126 living units, a hotel fronting on the French Street roadway there, and then about 2 acres for Ross Valley Sanitary District headquarters of the future, bringing the district headquarters from Centerville back into Larkspur where it originally was. So this is the old sewer treatment plant we're talking about. That's kind of the current status of the zoning. It is what it is. Does anyone have any questions or comments on that right now? We're just trying to get some history behind this. And then the next on B, it's a review of the PCB contamination related actions. And we have up on our website now, I think we just put it up today, our application to the US EPA for a phase 1 temporary interim use, and we've got their response and their conditions of approval for an interim temporary use. They're saying minimum 5 years. That's all on the website, so go to the website and you get that. I've got them with me tonight. One is like 8 pages and one is like 14 pages. But rather than printing them all out and having them here, you just go to the website, you will see them. Ross Valley Sanitary District has received basically clearance for phase 1 for a temporary interim parking use. There's a number of conditions on it, and you can read the conditions at the district's website. The district has had a consultant working for a number of years. That's litigation was going on about the PCBs. The PCBs are there as a result of the old sewer treatment plant that the district abandoned. And rather than digging it up and taking it out and taking it off to a landfill, especially landfill, Henderson site, landfill big down in Hanford or something, they kind of collapsed it, broke it up and buried it. And so that's what's in the ground, and that's the issue that's before the EPA. And that's the issue that we'll be grappling with for some time to come. It's not gonna be a quick fix on that. The EPA has said that the PCBs are fixed, they're solid, they're attached to the structures of the tanks, et cetera, that were in there. And there's also in their letter, they said there may be more. And I don't know if they know there's more. I don't know if there's more, but that's in their letter. So there's going to have to be additional testing before any real final determinations are made, and we get any clearance from the US EPA. Greg, you want to, anything that I'm missing that you want to add, do you think?
Just, a couple of quick comments just to add to what Frank's covered. This whole process that we're in now with EPA really started, the current process in the last roughly 12 months. So the documents that you can find on our website, the first one is referred to as the application that the district submitted to the EPA. It's a fairly lengthy document. The main application is something you can download pretty readily, but there's a technical appendix to it that has all of the extensive testing and everything else that went on over the years to support the application. This was a lot of work that was done, after the PCBs were discovered, and there was site characterization work and so on done to, just as it sounds, to characterize the nature and the extent of the problem. So that application was done earlier this calendar year. Then what we received back from EPA was, as Frank described, is what's called a conditional approval for the phase 1 parking use. So the application that we put in had a two-phase approach. It said we'd like to use the land in an interim manner, which has certain standards and criteria from the EPA's perspective, and then eventually come back and work on establishing appropriate conditions on the site for the permanent long-term use, whatever that is determined to eventually be. So that's kind of the relationship of those documents. There's a few other ongoing correspondence items that are on our website, but that really kind of brings you up to speed. We made an application, they gave us a conditional approval, and we're sort of digesting that conditional approval at this point because it has a lot of language and criteria and so forth that we're sort of wrestling to figure out exactly what it means. And so we're basically still in a dialogue with EPA to clarify some of those remaining questions. But that's essentially the status.
At our October meeting, we did take this subject up. It was on our agenda, and the board approved 3 of 9 steps to direct staff to start a process. The first was to confirm that the general concept of public parking uses for an approximately 5-year planning horizon makes sense and support Rossville Sanitary District's core mission and interests and achieve the intended broader public benefits. And at the time, we are discussing with the city of Larkspur, who has ultimate authority on the land. We are in Larkspur city limits, and we're not going to do anything on that land without Larkspur's approval. The other parties were Golden Gate Bridge Highway and Transportation District, and this has been some discussions that have been going on for a few years. When I first came on the board in 2010, there was some discussion about a temporary interim parking lot for Larkspur Ferry Terminal. That they were having ball games and they were taking ferries over to the Giants games, and they needed overflow parking. So the district started discussing this issue back then. Here we are 4 years later, still discussing the issue. But the district is getting a little more, Golden Gate Bridge Highway Transportation District is getting a little more serious because they see an immediate need for parking. At the same time, Marin Airporter is taking a look at the property to see if there's any options there available to them, since they may be they are having to leave their current site in the next 6 months or so. There's the Country Mart owners who are looking at overflow parking or employee parking. There's just a lot of interest in parking uses there. So those are the folks that have been expressing interest. We've also have a number of people who expressed long-term interest. There's been some offers made in the property, and the district has not entertained offers. We've told folks we're not accepting any offers. We have to determine what's going to happen with the property before we have to start accepting any offers of it. We'll have this evening, as a wrap-up, Bob Silvestri from Community Venture Partners, and they're looking at a concept for potential use of the land that would be a joint venture with the district. It would be a long-term lease. They talk about cleaning the PCBs on the site, getting federal grants, et cetera, but that you'll hear about when they make their presentation. So, let's see, we discussed the parking use. And please, any question, just raise your hand.
Well, are you going, I just want to add a little bit.
Sure, please.
So the size of the property for the parking is approximately 5.3 acres. And I think the entire property is a 10 acres.
Just about 10 acres.
So it's not all of the land. And what Frank is talking about with Mr. Silvestri is phase 2. Phase 1 is just looking at conditional approval for the parking, just so we're all clear here on our direction. And yes, we have been approached several times because of the problem with the parking in the area. And so this land currently now has approval by the EPA to move ahead. So, you know, we're trying to work with the community, we're trying to work with citizens, we're trying to work with many groups to understand what they're looking and looking at how we're looking at it. So there's options, there's many options that are going to be floating out there for a while. Yes.
So the parking is at the lower level of this property where the PCB
It's kind of the
materials have been
center,
buried?
kind of the center of the property.
So it might have to be moved in the future? Is that, you said 5 years?
Well, the phase 2 would be the final disposition of the property, whatever that's going to be. And it may include removal, excavating out all the way down, getting all the PCBs out of it, and getting a clean bill of health for that land, for the agency and for the taxpayers of Ross Valley, who ultimately are going to be liable for anything that goes wrong out there. But that would be phase 2 when that would occur.
And so,
yes.
yeah, this.
Oh, if you just tell us your name, just
Sure.
for the record.
Yeah, Kelly Jones.
Okay.
So this temporary phase is seen as potentially lasting for 5 years, is that right? Or?
Up to 5 years. You know, we think it'll take a while to get the site really cleaned up. It'll take a while to determine the ultimate land use with the city of Larkspur. And, you know,
I see, so
It's gonna take a while.
that's encompassing all of that, like figuring out what you need to do to make it a parking lot, figuring out what you need to do to clean it up so that it can have a subsequent use then, is that right?
Exactly.
And we really don't know the cost of cleanup. We don't know how much cleanup, though I called the firm that has been looking at this with the EPA, and they're saying there's some areas that don't even need to be cleaned up. So, and then the testing, you know, I mean, some of the stuff could be 8 feet down in the ground, so all the stuff is still kind of floating out there. Yeah.
Just a part of the timing, you know, recognizing all this was put together at just a very conceptual level, and I think that's still a fair characterization of it. So recognize that's how all this information is at this point in terms of the parking proposal. So the 5 years also was intended to coordinate somewhat with what we were hearing, for example, from Golden Gate in terms of the timing of their eventual efforts to add, you know, parking capacity at their site for the ferry terminal and so forth. So there was some thought behind the 5 years. It certainly is intended to be interim. And there's a staff report from the October board meeting of the Ross Valley District that touches a little bit on that. The idea being you implement the parking to put the land to beneficial use, and then while that's happening, in parallel, you're taking these other steps, figuring out the permanent remediation requirements, going through the dialogue and the process to figure out what the long-term land use should be, so that as the parking use was coming to a conclusion, ideally, you've now done the other work to set the site up for whatever's, you know, it's going to be used for next. That's sort of the overarching idea. it's obviously just that, kind of high level.
Do you have a really rough sense of how long it takes to get through this phase of working out the requirements for the parking and actually making parking
Short term.
happen?
That's
It's
what
it's
that's
very-
what we're learning.
Well, I
Yes.
talked to Todd Miller today, he said it could be done, we could go ahead quickly, that's what he told me on the phone, so.
Okay.
The other thing is that we have been using that area for a parking lot for overflow for Giants games. So this is not just coming from, you know, the land, we have been doing that, I
Well,
don't
didn't
know.
that before I came.
But it's been, I think that's
Yeah.
been
That was
some
proposed.
time.
I
Yeah,
don't know
it's
how it was
before my
agreed
time.
upon, I don't know
Yeah.
when it
I
happened.
think it was sort of a handshake deal back then.
Probably.
So,
Question here, yes.
Marina, and I'm a mother. My son goes to the Larkspur Landing Co-op,
Okay.
so I'm representing that community. For that parking, does that mean paved, and then later it would possibly have to be pulled up, or are we talking about a dirt parking lot?
Well,
well, okay, so first of all, if people want, there's a couple of figures back on the one table that show you some of the very conceptual layout. What we proposed at this point was fairly minimal surface improvements, which means, you know, basically clearing off the little bit of vegetation up on the site. There's some, you know, grasses and so on. We keep it pretty mowed down as it is, but you basically, you know, clean that out, put down heavy, what's referred to as a geotextile material. It's just like a super heavy fabric that would cover that. And then you have essentially like a graded crushed rock surface that would be just suitable for driving and walking, but not meant to be high service, you know, like you would have with a full paved parking lot. The idea there being to make it serviceable for interim parking, but recognizing that you, from a practical perspective, the capital improvements would essentially be throwaway at the end of the interim parking use. So that was the concept behind the sort of minimal surface improvements. Right now, there is not a plan to actually, you know, put asphalt paving over the area.
Well, if we're gonna be laid out for a parking lot, I'd imagine it'd have to be a surface that'd be substantial enough that it could be lined out, so that
Yeah.
folks would just drive in and park all over the place, they'd have to have room.
well, the EPA will have guidelines, definitely, on what anything we do.
So, and if it were paved, and if the use changed at the end of 5 years, it'd have to be taken up and prepared for the next phase.
What's on it now,
But
It's just dirt.
Just dirt?
Rock, gravel, Major Gelati came in and leveled it. I know the board wasn't even aware that it was leveled, and Larkspur wasn't either, and Larkspur said to Rock Gelati, you don't have any permits for that work. We went, what work? And so, you know, what we're doing now, we're working with Larkspur, because anything that we do down there needs a permit from Larkspur. And so it's a little change for Ross Valley. I guess at one time they told Larkspur, we don't need permits, but the new board says we need permits. So we're gonna take care of all the permits and do everything according to what Larkspur needs done.
But there's no need to have an environmental impact report or anything?
Well, that's a question. We don't know that yet. You know, it has to go through a process here. It has to go through a legal process. So it just, you're not gonna walk out there one day and find a paved lot with, and you won't know how it got there. I mean, it has to be a process, and somebody has to be the lead agency, and somebody has to make environmental determinations to determine whether or not an environmental impact report is necessary. And it may be, it needs an environmental checklist, and possibly a full EIR, possibly, maybe it's category exempt, I don't know. We're not to that point, but that has to be dealt with in a very public manner. Yes.
So, Mary, so I heard you say, or maybe you said that the airporter has to move out in 6 months.
That's what we understand.
So, is there a plan where they're gonna go?
So we've had, following the board's approval back in October to just start this, you know, discussion, we've met with the district and representatives from Golden Gate and the airporter and the city and the Country Mart. We've had varying mixes of that group have met, you know, say roughly about 6 or 7 times in the past, you know, roughly month and a half. And so I'm sort of speaking from secondhand knowledge. I don't think we have a representative of Marin Airport or Golden Gate here this evening, so take what I say with that kind of caveat. My understanding is, yes, and some of this was fairly public knowledge. There was a termination of the year-to-year lease that the airport has been operating under for 25 plus years. That was being done on Golden Gate's part because of simply the need for that space for their primary purposes of parking for the ferry customers, which has been essentially their problem has been overflowing to all the other neighborhoods in the area. So my understanding is they have exercised that. They've terminated the lease. There's a timeline, that is in play right now that will dictate when the Marin Airport needs to relocate off of that site. This is at the west end of the landing, if folks know the neighborhood by the theater. And they have been offered some other options by Golden Gate, one of them being a property on Anderson Drive over in San Rafael. Now, what decisions those parties make, I don't want to comment on because that's kind of up to them. If that occurs, then, the idea is then the Golden Gate Ferry would have access to that roughly 350 parking spaces that are now occupied there, which would meet their, help meet their needs, but of course, you're now moving the airport. The reason they were in this discussion, have been in this discussion as part of this concept was that they be one of the parties that utilizes the district's property in the future out of a preference to stay in that neighborhood, to keep their operations in that neighborhood, which they've been very clear. Yeah, right, and it seemed to make a lot of sense. So that's been clearly their preference. What those parties are deciding to do is, I don't really want to comment on because they're not here, but that is all, I think, relatively upfront knowledge at this point.
Did we notify them of this meeting?
Oh, yeah,
Oh,
they were
okay,
good.
okay.
And how many parking spaces could we, with our land, would be used?
So the old staff, the staff report from October, just in case anyone's looked at it, it makes a reference. It was our very early estimate. It talked about up to a nation north of 700 spaces.
700.
That number has been refined. We had just again a really rough conceptual layout done, but once you account for driving lanes and everything else, it's down to probably more in the range of say 500 to 550 plus or minus spaces could be laid out in that area. That's again just on a real rough initial layout.
So you have 5 acres of level each land that doesn't have to be bulldozed or anything to make this happen?
Minimal improvements, yes, yeah.
So, the land uses around it, above it is the Drake's Way homes that the affordable housing is above it. So anything that happens there, we gotta be careful about how we impact our neighbors too. Whether it be a parking lot or whatever. They all have a stake in what's going to happen on that property. So the Larkspur Landing is a transportation hub. We haven't created that. It's happened. The ferry terminal is there. SMART is coming in for a station there. The Marin Airport is a major public facility connecting Central Marin with the airport. So the folks that we are discussing inter-parking with are basically public type agencies that are involved in the transportation business. And, the road is a killer there, coming off Sir Francis. I just noticed tonight, I came around the back way and I came onto Drake down through Larkspur Landing, and that traffic just backed up going out 101 heading back towards San Francisco. And that's a cutoff they're taking to get to the Richard Sandfeld Bridge. So whatever happens there with parking, there's going to be an impact. There's going to be additional impact, if that's a parking lot. For the should Marin Airport be relocated over there, we're just gonna move their parking over there, but then the parking that they free up is gonna be taken up by Golden Gate Transit, so, there's gonna be a traffic impact with any development that would take place.
A comment,
Yes.
actually. Just in terms of, you know, kind of looking at transportation uses in Larkspur Landing, ultimately. And I'm not, this is kind of up for grabs, but somebody's gonna have to solve the problem at some point. It's worth you guys considering that if and when the SMART train does actually come to Larkspur, the big problem that it has now, even if they can get it there, which is a very big if, but if they can get it there, the problem is it's about a third of a mile away from the ferry building. If they move the airport over there, it's a half a mile away from the airport. We have enough inclement weather and enough issues where there's just no, that's not a practical solution. So Golden Gate Bridge, which is kind of in the driver's seat here, is gonna have to eventually come to terms with the fact that if they want the SMART train to work in concert with the ferry and with the airport, they're gonna have to make it work for pedestrians. And that means that the airport is better located where it is now, if you turn that into something. It's a very dumb idea, if I can say without equivocating, to move the airport from where it is over there to get parking for the Golden Gate Bridge. If you're gonna get parking, you just get it all in one place. I mean, it just makes no sense at all. So I don't understand, is it the parties aren't talking to each other or whatever, but being, or no one's in charge and it's just kind of happening, but being you're in a pivotal position because you're a landowner there and you have a particular interest, I think it's in your interest, short-term or long-term or whatever, to grapple with that issue because we all want transportation to work, you know, as best it can, and it's not going to work the way it's going. So I just want to, you know, put that out there.
Sure.
I think it's a very important part of the conversation, even because when we say things are interim, we all know that certain pieces of that end up being more permanent. It's just the way life is.
So, going back a number of years, I was on the original Highway 101 Corridor Committee with the Sonoma County and Marin County representatives. And before SMART was ever in existence, this is going back to the 80s, we talked about the possibility of, if there was ever a train that would run on the old right-of-way, that it would come into the Larkspur landing area and then wrap around the island and go right over to the ferry terminal and drop people off and make a loop and go back up and go back out. At that time, it said that makes sense with a train and ferry connection would be right immediate. They'd come right into the ferry terminal and drop people right there and turn around and go back out. That's not going to happen at all. I mean,
Well, if they built a monorail on the old thing instead of building a 19th century train, they could have done it. $2 billion later.
Oh.
But just to add to your comment about liaison and leadership, bringing these groups together, I don't think we have really gotten to that point yet. There's been some talk in outside boardrooms or whatever,
Yeah.
but I totally agree with you. There needs to be a summit of some kind and figure it out. Is this the best for the Ross Valley? And let's move. Otherwise, it's wasting time and effort and energy, and we're getting approached from the community. So it's not like we're going out there. People are coming to us on different levels, on different endeavors. So I want to put, I'm hoping when we recap tonight's meeting is that we will have that kind of plan for us. To bring those groups together, and there should, you know, maybe it's the city of Larkspur, maybe it's the ferry people, and maybe it's countrywide. I'm not clear on which groups, but.
And maybe SMART needs to be part of this whole discussion. They're involved in maybe a major player. And so basically, what we are a public agency, and we want to know what the folks who live here in the city limits of Larkspur think about what's going on here too. That's one of the reasons we're holding this committee meeting before it gets to the full board, so we've got a little sense about where this whole thing's going. And
If I can just say about your comment, the only reason the airport would have any reason to be at Larkspur Landing is smart. Nobody goes to Larkspur Landing, nobody comes off a ferry, then gets on an airport and goes back to San Francisco. I mean, it doesn't work that way. So the airport could be anywhere on the 101 corridor. It could be at the Denny's site, which is going to be vacated. There are a lot of sites along 101. It could be anywhere along 101 as a location to get people out of their car and go to the airport. The only reason to put it at Larkspur Landing Park is smart.
And I'm not.
So that's why they have to be at the table, I agree.
And I'm not sure that Marine Airport
What is the
would want to
vision?
invest that kind of money for a temporary use. I mean, they need a long-term solution, they don't need a short-term solution. But anyway,
Just saying.
that's why we're all here talking about where we're going with this. And so we want to get this before it comes back to the board. Will it be back to the board at the December
Yes.
meeting?
Yes.
Okay, so it's going to be back before the whole board at the December meeting. I'm not sure if we're going to be any further along at the December 19th?
17th.
December 17th. I'm not sure if we're going to be ready for a recommendation. But this is kind of an initial foray into it, to give the public a real opportunity to come down and talk to us about where they think we should be going. We got a question?
My name's Robert Miltner, and I feel deja vu all over again coming here because this 5-year window, or 5-year timeline seems awfully short. If you look at the traffic jam you talk about, I just came through it at noon on Wednesday or Tuesday. When it was just a little rain plugged up 101 there at the Paradise exit. And it was a nightmare. It just was completely logjam. So parking makes a lot of sense. And I think this business about the airport makes all the sense in the world, because that's the reason it makes a connection to the airport from the damn train. And to put it in San Rafael just is the wrong direction to go. So why do we have to figure a 5-year horizon on this thing? What exactly is in mind? I mean, I know you're looking at options at the end of the 5 years, but surely you don't think we're gonna build more buildings for houses or anything like that?
We were thinking it might take us 5 years to go through the complete planning process and determination in conjunction with the city of Larkspur to figure out what it's gonna be in the end. And rather than having it just sit there as it is for 5 more years.
Put
we
cars
thought
on it
maybe we put
and-
some temporary use on it.
I agree with you about the airport or not wanting to make a short-term investment in a new place here on the property. Why not let them make a longer-term one, or somebody like that?
Well, so that'll be part of this discussion.
Yeah, the city of Larkspur's planning department makes me nervous. They're the ones who thought up, they got all the way to third base with that Larkspur landing proposal.
Well,
Everybody got
okay, but the
excited.
city council made the right decision in the end.
Yes, they
so-
did, but the
So,
planning department sure went a long way with it.
And other questions to be addressed are zoning and amendment to a general plan, whatever. All this needs to be reviewed, so it will take some time.
folks talk about government, the wheels of government churning slowly. They really do. I mean, I'm sorry to say that.
Painful.
but- Catherine, you had a
Sure.
question?
For the record, Catherine Wade, I live here in Larkspur. So Frank, would you elaborate more on what you see as C5, the City of Larkspur's consideration? And you just made a comment about the general plan, and you referenced ordinances that have already been voted on and adopted into the general plan by the City of Larkspur a number of years ago. So where do you see how your new position is going to fit into that already vested situation that's been created there already? And I can maybe elaborate, or maybe you
Yeah,
can.
let me just, try to at least get it started, because we have met with City of Larkspur officials, as part of this working group. We've had at least 2 discussions, maybe more. And so all that's referring to is when they're, and again, there's no one here from the city, so I won't take this as our understanding. When they look at the proposal, the concept of the interim parking use, they're looking at it, amongst other things, they're looking at it through the lens of what is the current allowed or zoned uses for that parcel. So that's, the only reason we're mentioning that is because whether you agree with it or disagree with it, or what your thoughts are on the history, that's what's currently on the book, so to speak, and it's these ordinances that are referred to, 948, 951, 954. All those are is the ordinances that basically codified what's called the precise plan.
Right.
And that precise plan was the last detailed approved land use for the site, and it involved, as Frank summarized earlier, the 120 odd housing units, a hotel site, and a future operations and administration, facility for the Ross Valley Sanitary District. So it's sort of with that baseline of land use that, again, amongst other things, that the city has to evaluate the idea of then having an interim land use for parking. In other words, how compatible or not is that with what's at least already on the books? I mean, that's not the whole picture, but it's part of the picture. So that's the primary reason we're making reference to that existing approved land use, if you want to.
Right, and I think it's important that people know that that approved land use went about many years ago for the 127 units, a hotel, and a facility use by the Ross Valley Sanitary District.
Yeah, this is 2006, I think, roughly. That's the timeline we're talking about of when those ordinances were approved by the city. So obviously, a lot has changed in almost 10 years, since those were done, and that's an important consideration as well, so.
And maybe Larkspur wants to rethink that 10 acres at Larkspur Landing Circle. That's another reason we're here. Let's get everything on the table and see where we are. Because we don't want to be going down the wrong direction and find out a year from now that we made a mistake and the folks in Larkspur really don't want to see whatever we're talking about. Question, yes.
If we go down the road of the 5 years and, parking and such, in your discussions, I don't know if you're permitted to say this or not, but the parking for the airporter and potentially up here where we're at, is that going to be paid parking like we are doing at the parking lot? And then if so, are we going to be, as ratepayers, being generated some income that we could be using to facilitate future activities?
That's got to be part of the whole, this whole discussion.
So we're not giving
we
this
haven't-
away, right?
We haven't talked about that. What we have is, as landlords, I'm concerned about us as landlords. We have a falling down chain link fence there. There's no sidewalks along Larkspur Landing Circle. There's no sidewalks up Grace Way fronting our property. And we need to take care of that too. So whatever's going to happen on an interim basis, it's going to have to include new fencing, appropriate fencing, aesthetically pleasing fencing. It's going to have to include sidewalks down there, be some street trees planted, et cetera. I mean, that's a beautiful area of Larkspur, and we're not doing our part to help the city's overall appearance with our chain
And
link
it
fence.
shadows over the school of the young children as well. So it's,
Sure, sure.
But that was one of my questions when I went out with Greg to look at the land, was financially and the funding, and because this land belongs to the people of the Ross Valley. And so that's what I'm saying, is we need to bring the people to the table, look at how we're going to work out who's going to pay what to put it all together, whatever it be. Even sidewalks could be $100,000 maybe. And so those things are still not being ironed out. So that piece, and if we do parking, how much would we charge for each car? I also talked to Greg about bicycles. I mean, there's just so much still that's kind of like floating, but that is a very good question. And would we profit, and how would we profit, and would the agencies profit? I mean, it is a juggling act so far.
and can that profit continually be put towards that land instead of other uses, or, what's best overall?
I mean, you could look at it and even say, well, maybe for some other cost for that land in the future would be put in a general fund. It could be all kinds of things, all kinds of things. I mean, maybe decrease your rates. I mean,
Right.
yeah, I'm kind of
It
excited.
seems to me,
Positive.
it seems to me that we need to know a little more about the future of the SNART train, because I heard that it's not fully funded yet.
It's
Will
not.
it ever be fully funded? And if it isn't, then this changes the whole what's going on in the picture.
Not necessarily.
It doesn't?
No, because there's still a need for parking for the ferry.
Won't there be less going on if you don't have the smart train or the people and cars for that? That will need more parking.
When Smart went on a ballot, they said they were gonna take it to Larkspur. I think people in the county think it's coming to Larkspur. They underestimated the cost, they don't have the money, but I think eventually it's gonna reach Larkspur. We have to plan for that, we have to be ready for it when it comes. But it may be, I don't know, maybe 10 years away, maybe 20 years away, who knows? Maybe we're just spinning our wheels here tonight too.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I understand.
Marin Airport or Golden Gate Bridge Highway Transportation District, Country Mart, is anyone from Country Mart here this evening? Probably not, okay.
So just maybe, like, Ken, Frank, just for some quick background on that?
Sure.
Just to kind of complete the picture, because their name was obviously mentioned. So they've been, the Country Mart retail complex has been expressing interest in parking access really since the most recent discussions started, over a year ago. And because these problems with the parking down there, they really just spill over from one property to the next. So when the ferry is maxed out, of course, people go next door, and then they're, try not to play hardball with each other, meaning the Golden Gate Ferry people and Country Mart. And I've sat in conversations, so I think I can speak to this. They've really worked hard to be, to be good neighbors with each other in terms of accommodating the parking challenges. So on weekends, Golden Gate has made their lot available because their demands are down on weekends. But on weekdays, they're maxed out, and Country Mart's maxed out during certain retail hours. So that the problem just kind of spills from one side to the other. So they have, by all indications, as I understand, and from listening to them in the room at the same time, they've really worked hard to try and address the problem as best they can between them. But there's just only, once the area is maxed out, there's just no place else for people to go. So the interest that they've expressed in this proposal or concept, it would be something like, could some portion of their employees, it was not meant to be customer parking, because that has a much different level of service and expectations when you're a customer of a retail complex. But could they alleviate part of their problem by having, for example, employee parking on some portion of this site, which would then just, in turn free up parking at, in the complex for their actual customers. So that's the interest that they've expressed in this, and I guess that's all I can say about that if there's no one here for them.
So we have Golden Gate Bridge Highway Transportation District, a public agency. City of Larkspur, public agency. Marin Airport, it's a private agency, but they provide their transportation conveyancing group that provides transportation. And the Country Mart is the only really private enterprise in this whole puzzle. So that's the Country Mart is owned by private investors, and they're looking at it from their standpoint as far as what their needs are. And that being said, let's talk a little bit about the benefits of the parking use. We've talked about the parking use, there's some benefits. What's the downside? Any thoughts on downside of this becoming an interim parking lot? What folks think? You think it makes sense, or is it are we creating a monster down there? What?
But there will be more cars on Francis Street, won't it? Inevitably coming and going.
It will. So the parking impacts.
Well, I guess the other aspect might be that by permitting parking there and then setting up a circumstance where theoretically it's going to end, what's going to happen to that use then? And it's permitted a growth of business and really activity that is supposed to theoretically end. It may not really make way for another use then.
Well, we don't know for sure, but Golden Gate Bridge Highway Transportation District has talked about putting some multi-level parking out there, a lot there. I don't know if that's coming to pass. I don't know what the city of Larkspur thinks about it. It's going to block a lot of views. It's going to be kind of an ugly structure there. But they're looking at long-term parking. And, this may not work for them either. So I'm not sure where it's all going to end up. But Any parking lot's gonna draw additional traffic, absolutely.
We wouldn't need a traffic study, would
Well, somebody may need a traffic study.
we? We need a traffic study?
Well, you know, I don't, you know, once we get involved with the California Environmental Quality Act and someone goes through a checklist,
Okay.
I'm thinking they will need a traffic study.
Can I just say, I
Yeah.
think you're gonna have to, you have an environmental impact report, I assume, on 127 units in the hotel.
Well,
No, it
well,
wasn't
there
the,
is.
There's no
It's-
EIR on that?
It was a mitigated negative declaration.
Really?
Oh, really?
It might,
Oh, wow. All right,
it might
well,
just be
then you
trying-
may be,
yeah.
I was gonna say, if you had an EIR in place, you could probably either supplement or amend it, and if you look at, you know, an argument to lessen.
So that was before
You haven't
Pam,
done one.
that was before Pam and Frank, so, you know, we're kind of playing catch-up with that.
Yeah.
No, I'm just asking.
So I can address, I mean, in terms of impacts from this, the one that's been most readily identified over and over again is the traffic. It's meant to provide benefits, you know, to the uses in the area, one of which is the ferry complex. So there's offsetting issues here, and so, number one, the group clearly recognized from the beginning that you would need a dependable traffic analysis to support the city's consideration of the proposal in terms of their permitting and also the lead agency for CEQA if they were to do so. So that is not open to question that I'm aware of. Everyone recognizes the need for that. The comments I've heard have indicated, you know, it's a complicated question because, for example, this is what Golden Gate has expressed. You know, they have the first set of ferries that go out are always maxed out because essentially they run out of places for people to come and park and get on the ferry. So they have a series of ferries that go out, typically overloaded, or not overloaded, but full. And then later in the morning, they have the next series of ferries that go out are typically not full, not because there's not demand for them, but because there's no, at that point, people have just given up and they've gone, you know, they've either driven to the city or they've taken other options. So for example, when you have all those traffic, those vehicle trips who come and say, well, can't get on, there's no place to park, I'm going to the city, what does that mean? Okay, well, clearly there's some trip addition on the one hand. They came down, they drove around the neighborhood, they couldn't find a place to park, they drove to the city. If there'd been a place to park, they would have parked and gotten on the ferry. So it's a kind of, that's why we would need the analysis, because it's not really clear what the trade-offs would be. Some things seem more obvious than others. For example, you know, if you free up employee parking and you then expect that to result in a net increase in retail use, you know, do you say, well, clearly that's more trips? But these are complicated questions, and we haven't gotten to that. We wanted to at least say, well, outline the basic uses by time of day, day of the week, weekends, special events, and kind of get an idea of who's coming and why, and then you'd be able to feed that in at least to some kind of initial traffic, you know, study. And that hasn't happened yet. The idea, if it was going to happen or does happen, would be to utilize one of the existing traffic models that have been developed, because as I think most people know, there's been a lot of work done in this neighborhood, you know, for prior studies. And so you would probably pick up one of those past models and try to use it to do these questions. But, so the group clearly recognizes the need for that. The work has not been done yet.
We had one big color map we handed out, it was over at the table, there's a few left over there. And it kind of gives you an idea of what's available for the parking. If you go to our website, you'll find, and you go to the October, is it 18th meeting?
22nd.
October 22nd. October 22nd meeting, you'll find two maps, and the two maps on our website lay out where the parking might go. And it's kind of the center of the property. If you come up, Larkspur Lane Circle, where the entrance is to get into that lot now where our trucks are parked, and there's a stadium building and a pump station. That entrance, that's kind of would be kind of the entrance of the parking lot, and the parking lot's kind of laid out there. It would become like the center of the property. It wouldn't get into the pond on the northeast portion of the property. It wouldn't get down in the lower section that adjoin the restaurant where the kiln is. None of that, close to that location would be parking. No parking would be on that little loop piece that goes down to Sucre and Big Boulevard, but it'd be the kind of center.
It won't be overnight.
It would not be, well, we don't know what kind of parking, we talked about overnight.
No, but I don't think we
temporary. That's probably an issue that needs
There's
to
another
be discussed
issue.
too. Overnight, temporary, overnight, no.
I don't think so.
Well, because if the, Captain will take it, so if the Marin Airport or the Rotary or they used to provide overnight.
They do, they do, a lot of them, overnight. Okay, so,
Phase two.
talk about number 5, city of Larkspur considerations for getting housing elements to everything. Yeah, okay.
Let me see the question.
I'm sorry, you want?
So my question is, the city of Larkspur, and will there need to be an amendment to the general plan? And will there be a need of changing zoning? I mean, I don't know. And is the city of Larkspur willing to help with permit fees and be part of this group that we're trying to put together to consolidate this potential parking effort? I'm just wondering, have you had any conversations or looked at that? Yes, Larry?
Larkspur has not had a conversation except for some of us with staff. So at this point, we're amenable to having, joint conversation. We've had our public works speaking with all the related entities in the area. And the two entities you didn't mention was also Caltrans and Transportation Authority in Marin. Okay, so they've been included in the mix, but all this has been a trade more at the public works level than at the policy level. But I think several discussions need to be made at the policy level as well. Your mention of what documents, yeah, it's the documents that you mentioned, plus we would need to modify our housing element because the 125 units are part of the existing cycle up to 2014. So if that doesn't actually happen, we don't know what the impact will be to us if that changes.
Okay, so those, the units show up in your current cycle,
Yeah.
2007, 2014?
That's correct.
I see, okay. Now, when we go to 2015, does it start all over again?
Yeah, that's a separate cycle. We have 132 units which staff believes they can.
Can they count those 126 or
No,
what?
that's already been counted.
You can't, since they wasn't built, you can't roll them over and recount them?
That was counted in the prior cycle.
No, you can count anything that's not developed and permitted. Again, this I know for a fact.
Okay.
You can count anything, the only question would be, is it, if it's not gonna ever be housing within the years, the question ABAG will have is, if you're gonna have this parking there for 5 years, is it a viable site to include? Meaning like, is this real? Because what if a developer comes next year and wants to do it? You can't do it because you've already pledged it for 5 years somewhere else. So I think, but other than that, you can use any property. That's what the county's doing now. They're basically just cherry picking out properties that were already in it, but were never had any application for proposal. And they're saying those are now arguments for the new housing. They're not creating new property.
Yeah, I'll need to get a clarification from staff only because the precise plan as well as the tentative map has already been approved.
But for RENA purposes, it doesn't impinge that, and that's an SB 375. You don't have a connection between that. You can satisfy your RENA without changing your general plan if you're not adding to the general plan. In other words, if your general plan already says there's enough for 300 units and you now have 132, you don't have to amend your general plan because, you know, you're just for RENA purposes saying you just want to consider these 132 now.
Yeah, that
And you're
part-
allowed to do that, yeah.
I know, the town of Fairfax is grappling with the same issue.
Well, they misunderstood.
Because they improved their numbers, the 172 to beat that earlier window, and now they're looking at 2015 to 2022, and they're asking ABAG, can we roll over some of the previous?
Well, the answer is obvious, because the county has.
But nobody wants to give it to us in writing.
Well, maybe I will give it to you right. The county had 778 units in the last cycle. Out of that 778, they're now down to 419, the exact same properties. They just eliminated the few hundred above that. They didn't include them in their new inventory list. But the properties included in the 419 inventory list that they're going to talk about next Tuesday are the exact same properties that were in the 778. They've not created a new property.
Oh, okay.
Because none of them were developed.
TAM and Caltrans, we haven't even thought of
Well-
asking TAM and Caltrans, have we?
But I want to ask Larry, if you don't mind. So is there an interest for the city of Larkspur to really work with these agencies? Do you know offhand? Because I've talked to some other council people, I don't want to say who, but who seem like, this was a real major problem for Larkspur and can we help? So I'm getting the feeling that maybe that's not necessarily true for the city, or I'm just trying to find out. What is the interest?
We started this discussion 2 years ago.
Oh, you did, okay.
Yeah, so like I said, a working committee has already been set up amongst the public works people.
Really? I didn't know that.
And the Ross Valley Sand District was never part of that discussion because the parking issue was more focused towards the interchange. That particular property at the time was still being considered for development by Campus St. James. Or that even after whatever dispute that was going on between the two parties, that it was still something that, let's just say, was unresolved. It's still, from our point of view, since we got to the point of a tentative map, it was going to be housing. The only other thing that, if there's some expanded discussion is that, we still don't know what can actually be done along Sir Francis Drake if it's really about parking. Because we had already we were notified through some other thing related to the station area plan where they were looking at traffic and all that, and then said, this space out here doesn't have the appropriate width, and this is a liability out here. And that's where we lost something like, 72 spaces, whatever it was. So, again, if you want to create adequate space, then you're dealing with private property on both sides, primarily we're probably looking at the south side. So that would be, in part, a little bit of land that's the city's because we have a park out there, but mostly it's along the frontage for Golden Gate.
What's going to be interesting is when Wind Cup is actually finished and people move in, just kind of see what kind of traffic impact that's going to have on this whole area. It's, we have no idea really. I know Larkspur and Corte Madera have a committee and they're working on it.
That's right. I'm not gonna have
Probably
car,
trying to
so-
come up with some after the fact solutions to try to deal with it. But I think it's going to be a good indication for all of us to see how that whole thing plays out. From us up in the upper Ross Valley, we were really paying a lot of attention to what was going on down here, but there it is.
But Frank, they're all gonna be walking and biking. Can't get some parking places for them.
I don't think so. Catherine?
Pam, I'll answer your question too, is that, I think it's really important that we all work together, and there are so many different agencies within that small that area that we're talking about. And I think that with our city staff continuing to work with your staff and the electeds continuing to talk, be happy to continue that process. But we need to be aware that I was elected to represent the best interest of the citizens of Larkspur. And whether parking is in their best interest, I'm not sure yet, or whether it serves the interest of outside commuters who are coming in and parking and they don't have any relationship really to Larkspur. So, I mean, we still need to flesh those things out. And with the general plan decision about what's the best use of that property has already been discussed, then we need to continue to discuss that for what is going to serve the best interest of Larkspur. Because that's what my fiduciary responsibility is. And I mean, I presume your fiduciary responsibility is the best interest of the sanitary district, Ross Valley Sanitary District ratepayers, right? So.
Well, yes, but
We just-
we have 4 incorporated cities in our district, so Larkspur, Ross, San Anselmo, and Fairfax. And we have to take into consideration all their interests in what we're doing, where we're replacing pipe, et cetera. But so Larkspur is a big piece of Ross Valley Sanitary District. And we're not gonna do anything that adversely impacts the city of Larkspur. That's our goal, is to make this work for everyone. If it doesn't work for Larkspur, it can't work for us. So does Larkspur become the lead agency? Has that determination actually been made?
My understanding, I wouldn't say there's been a determination made, but in the conversations that the working group has had, it would seem reasonable that the discretionary permits, are coming from the city of Larkspur as a local agency, and therefore they would be the logical lead agency for the CEQA process. So that's an important role, obviously. And we have talked about this. I mean, what are the issues that would be relevant to CEQA and what, so several of the issues that have already been noted, including considerations of what this does or doesn't mean for the city's housing element of the general plan. These are a lot of pretty complicated issues, the traffic. So we have, through that discussion, said, yeah, it would make sense for the city to be the lead agency, but that's about as far as it's gotten. We haven't, started a process. And what the eventual level of CEQA analysis would be, whether it's a CADX or a mitigated neck deck or a full-blown EIR, also has not been established.
So all those costs have to be factored in. It's not an inexpensive process to go through CEQA, and somebody's gonna have to pay these costs. I'm not sure how that would work. We haven't discussed that. Would it be this Golden Gate Bridge Highway Transportation District gonna fund a good portion of this? I don't know. But that's gotta be part of the equation. It can't fall on Ross Valley, it can't fall on Larkspur, it can't fall on just one of the agencies. Somehow there has to be some kind of an equitable sharing system that's arrived at. I'm not sure. And then the next question is, if someone doesn't like the decision in the community, and there's a number of folks live in Larkspur, if someone doesn't like that, who might they sue? Who might they litigate? Since CEQA is just, there's always seems to be the opportunity for litigation under CEQA. So the question is, who would they litigate? Who would get sued here if someone doesn't like where this is going? They're going to sue us. They're going to sue the city of Larkspur. They're going to sue Golden Gate. I don't know. Maybe they sue everybody. So then there's a question of liability. Who's going to defend? Who's going to?
Yeah, but you look around the community and the Bay Area, these kinds of situations come up a lot, and people work it out, whatever, how, and when. Example is Marin General with the Catholic Church. They pay, they have some kind of contract, they've been doing for years, and they have worked out this integrated parking, where all their overflow from the hospital goes on Marin Catholic property. And so it's not like, I hear you, I know what you're saying, that it opens the gate for potential litigation or whatever, but I feel very hopeful of trying to create some kind of positive plan for everybody, including Larkspur, the ferry, and, you're going to be taking some cars off the street, go across on clean meeting. And
Secret, any comments on California Environmental Quality Act and where this might go? Any thoughts on that? Okay. The EPA conditional approval status, and it is conditional. They've laid out a number of conditions, and the consultant that had been advising Ross Valley under attorney-client privilege we are now releasing these public documents so the public can see what's been going on. The board hasn't seen some of these documents, but now we're putting them on a website. You can see EPA's comments and a list of conditions. They have a number of conditions for the interim use. Actually, a number of conditions that have to be met. About 11 of them. So it's not going to be a simple task to meet all of EPA's conditions. And their approval is conditional. So we have to deal with EPA. We've got to meet their conditions and somehow have everyone on board with it. It's not going to be an easy task with all the public agencies involved and a highly desirable piece of land sitting in Larkspur city limits. It is an important piece of property to the city of Larkspur. Any questions about EPA, about any of those conditions? Okay. Well, let's have, if we move on then to item number 5, other future land use concepts, and so we've talked about what's approved by the city of Larkspur, what the general plan allows, 125, 126, number of units, a hotel would be probably under the Francis Drake portion, a portion of that going for the headquarters for the Ross Valley Sanitary District. In the Larkspur Landing stationary plan, that 126 was up to about 250, but that plan has gone by the wayside and it is done. So, other future land use concepts. I think we need to hear from the folks in Larkspur and the Larkspur City Council what they think where they think we're going to be going. We're surely not going to go off on a tangent that Larkspur doesn't agree with. So somehow we've got to come together on some kind of a future land use concept here. And so we've got Bob Silvestri from Community Venture Partners, and they've been talking about a proposal for that Larkspur Landing site for a while now. And so tonight, Bob Silvestri is here. He's going to make a little presentation on it, and we'll have a few questions and answers to give you some idea about what might be able to happen there. And I believe his concept includes some senior housing, so housing is still part of the overall concept. But Bob, do you want to?
Where should I stand or sit or?
Okay,
what should
so
I do?
how
Over there?
That's kind of
It's a little official, but I need a place to put something.
Yeah, that might be about the best for folks to really hear you.
And I'm the police.
What do you think? There you go. Okay. Well, you have a blue shirt on, so that's fine. Just
Hi,
go back.
everybody. I'm here to solve all your problems. So I'm Bob Silvestri, president of Community Venture Partners. We're the new guys on the block, but we're not that new. So let me tell you a little bit about Community Venture Partners, just so you understand who we are, what we are. This is a concept that I kind of started talking about 2 years ago and finally had to put up or shut up and do it or stop talking about it. And my feeling was that there are a lot of situations like this situation where you have many participants and many competing interests, and you need to structure public-private partnerships, cooperative ways of working to somehow try to address all these things. It doesn't work in a competitive market environment. You don't get the right solution. You either get whoever's got the most money, or whoever's got the most power, or whoever's got, but it just doesn't work. So, you know, we were somewhat instrumental in stopping the Larkspur station area plan. I think gratefully on all sides. Just to tell you a little bit about me, my background is pretty diverse. I'm a licensed architect. I was a planner, an architect. I was a real estate developer. I did about 2,000 units of Section 8 housing. I had many, many partnerships in doing that. I've had a finance company. I've had technology companies that develop software. And so I have this kind of overview from my background, and I've got, have many relationships with people in all these industries. And so when I looked at this property, it's kind of an extension of things I've been doing. I've been involved in Mill Valley for 20 years. There was a big controversy in 2007 called the Miller Avenue Precise Plan. I was on a committee about that. We went through $1 million in consultants, and finally, I actually wrote the plan that they adopted pro bono, and just gave it to the city, and so I'm so tired of these committee meetings, and they adopted it. And I've done that a number of times in different cities, just kind of said, well, let's just get a bunch of people together, come up with a plan, and give it to the city, just give it to them. And that's kind of what I feel like I'm doing here. I'm saying, let's just see what might be a great idea. And I have this maybe optimistic view of the world that's worked for me so far, which is you start with great ideas and everything else follows. Because things are attracted to things that make sense, that work, that serve people, that serve communities, and people rise up, and somehow it happens. People come out of the blue and they help it. So there's this little handout. I'll just go through this kind of quickly to talk about this, and then I'll make some comments about financing and about PCBs and things like that. So the vision that CVP has is to do something completely different. And the idea is to, if there aren't any more, I've got some others that do, is to build a mixed-use project that combines a number of visionary things, the centerpiece of which is a working state-of-the-art hydroponic, aeroponic farming operation. And this is a business that would be run as a joint venture, nonprofit, for-profit, and I'll talk a little bit about more of that in a minute. We're envisioning what would be called a carbon neutral development. The entire development would be structured on higher than a LEED's platinum level for carbon neutral, meaning we would create energy, use our own energy, only have vehicles on the property that are running on electricity or natural gas, which we would produce on the property. We would have, as a fundamental thing, we would want to remediate the PCBs. I understand as a you know, kind of an interim thing that the EPA may agree to it, but I kind of have two words for this. It's Erin Brockovich. So, you know, you cannot leave toxins in the ground in an area where there's rising water, where there's baylands, it's seeping in. Sooner or later, somebody's going to say, you know what? We grew up in this house over here, and we swam in that every day, and suddenly we have this. And it's just whatever it costs, it has to be taken out. And from what I understand, it is at least a definable problem. There was a sewer treatment plant. It's not like we don't know where it is. We know where it is. We know how deep it was. There are ways to do this. And I agree it will take a couple of years to figure that out and to get it right, but I think it's fundamental. We would have, so the project has as its It has a working aeroponic hydroponic farm. It divides the property very similar. It leaves the south end for RVSD for its yard, and even envisioning that they could build their whole headquarters there. And we would also want to build housing, senior housing, and temporary housing for interns that are coming to work at the farm and learn. And I'll tell you about those programs in a minute. That would be on the upper part. And you know, there's about a 20-foot grade difference all of a sudden in the back to all of a sudden it just goes straight up. And so that's a kind of a natural use up there because there's already a property by EAH, it's already an affordable property. Put senior housing, fabulous view, great place to put it, put some housing there. So some of the ancillary pieces are we would obviously be growing for the restaurants and stores. Whole Foods would certainly be a buyer. And we would be recycling wastes and turning it into biofuels on the site from restaurants that are local and things like that. These are actually money-making businesses, all of them, and I think most of this would make money. And the other keystone piece is to have and create a center, a community center for organic farming education and research. We, as Marin, are one of the leaders in organic farming and ranching in the world, and we don't have a central place for this. And I talked with the CEO of Marin Organic, and he agreed with me. There's no central place that's not just a place where people can exhibit, but they can also have, in this day and age, a virtual presence. In other words, all these farmers can have a virtual presence, meaning a digital presence, a place where they can be talking about what they do. You can even order food from them to be delivered in this place, and it's an educational center. We want to bring together schools and have, you know, the schools be able to bring kids there and see what it is. We're working with a group called Veterans to Farmers, which is a group that takes U.S. veterans and trains them to be highly paid hydroponic farmers. People have talked about inmates at San Quentin being able to learn a trade. There are a million collaborations, and so the other piece I want to say is that this is a highly collaborative concept. I mean, there is no nonprofit in Marin that we wouldn't want to collaborate and talk to, and that goes to Sierra Club and Marin Land Trust and everyone else. I mean, because we're all looking for the same thing. And it's also structured, I want to talk a little bit about the way this comes together. I think that Ross Valley has an incredible asset in this land. And if I was Ross Valley, I would never want to sell this land. I would want to create income on this land. Because if it's worth 15 million today, it'll be worth 20 million in 6 years and 30 million in 10 years. And the problem that utility companies have is that their revenue streams are fairly fixed. And every once in a while, they have a real problem, like, oh my God, we've got to fix 10 miles of pipe because of some new regulation or this or that. Suddenly they need $7 million. And that's where they run into problems. That's what all utility businesses do. If they have an asset that they can borrow long against and pay short-term payments on against, this is like a bank account for RVSD. Keep it solvent forever without it always going to rate increases. And one of the problems utilities have is when they run into a problem, they raise rates, then they pay off the problem, but they never lower the rates again. And so that's a problem for users. So I see it as a real financing tool for them. So we don't want to buy the land. We want to land lease them for different purposes at different lengths. The housing will need a longer land lease than the farm will need. The farming operation is actually very lightweight. These greenhouses can be picked up and moved and whatever. You don't want to do that for a number of reasons. But so the financing of it also helps us because if we're not buying, we don't have to come up with all that money, which subsidizes the project. So, so the first thing is we are looking at a land lease situation, not a purchase situation. So Ross Valley stays in ownership. when it comes to the EPA situation and the PCBs, I had heard a figure, and Frank, I heard something like $5 million.
That was bandied about.
Does that come from anywhere real? I'm just curious.
Maybe 4 years ago.
Maybe 4 years.
When I
Okay.
first came on the board, the then executive director talked, general manager talked about options and the cost, and if we wanted to completely clean the site, it could run up to $5 million.
Could run.
If we had to excavate it, haul it off to Hanford to a hazardous waste landfill site.
Well, so the other way that CVP is structured is, you know, this is a company of partnerships and collaboration. So what we do in situations is, and the way we're designed, is to bring in different people for different purposes. So we have advisors who are really partners, who are willing to plug in and work on projects at different times. And it's a flexible system. I used it. I had a company for 16 years that did this, and we did development, and we could do pretty much anything you wanted, but we didn't have anybody on salary. And it's very flexible, it's good at solving problems, and it brings in the best when you need them. You don't have to say, well, we've got this guy, but he's not the best, but he's our guy. We don't get into that. Whoever's the best is who we're interested in. So whoever the best is to work in hydroponic farming is who we want to deal with. And whoever the best is in senior housing, locally, we want to deal with them. So the senior housing may be developed by a completely different developer. We are the lead developer, but a whole other developer who may even self-finance the housing himself, because they do that. There are some groups around that can do 35-unit projects. They're not the big nonprofits, but there are some very successful in Marin, Sonoma, and Napa that can do that kind of thing. So they would be partners. When it comes to finance, and I know you had a question to me about finance, and I want to talk about finance a little bit, because people, in my opinion, worry too much about money. So I'm kind of like, you know, the statistic is that in America we spend $700 million a year on barbecue sauce. So my opinion that money is a choice. It's about what people believe in and what we want. We spend $15 billion a year on cosmetics. You know, there's a lot of money in this world. It depends what it's for, and ideas attract money. Practicality does not always attract money. You don't start with money. And in fact, the woman that, Deborah Schwartz, who runs MacArthur Foundation's investments in these kind of things, says, you know, project first, tools and money second. So what are you trying to do? Then we figure out how to put it together. So in terms of, there's two pieces of the financing. There's developing it, and then there's ongoing revenues. So in terms of ongoing revenues, you have food retailers, you have restaurants, you have people that do this for a living. There are two companies in this country right now that are leading in this. One is called Bright Farms, the other is called Gowanus Greens. And for example, Gowanus Greens in Brooklyn, New York, in a partnership with Whole Foods, which is not appropriate here, but they build these everywhere. Whole Foods built a 24,000 square foot Whole Foods, and the roof is a 24,000 square foot hydroponic farm, and it produces 400,000 tons of food a year, more than they can even sell. All the water is recycled. It's an incredible piece of science. And this is where we have to be thinking, because this is the future. We have to start to think about this kind of development, not, I'm sorry, the old kind, which is, I have this set of plans I've been building for 20 years. I did it in Fresno. I did it in Concord. I want to do it here. You know, I changed the color. What's the problem? You know, so I think, you know, we've got to think about that. Part of the good news is that a couple things with CVP. One is that we have a relationship for the last 12 years with a company called Bon Appetit Management Company. So Bon Appetit is the biggest, they're the Whole Foods of corporate restaurateuring. When you go to Google and eat in any of their restaurants, it's all run by Bon Appetit. They do all of it. Vertically integrated farm to restaurant, all the way. And Maisie Ganser, who's head of strategy there, is a friend of mine. I've worked with her for a long time. She's instantly in this as an advisor, and they want to be part of it because they understand that this kind of thing is what makes sense. They see the farm as just another asset in this whole kind of picture and ecosystem that they work in. People in CVP, just to give you an example, two of the people who are part of CVP, apart from my resume, which is on my website, you can look at, and I've done finance for quite a while for all kinds of things. For movies, I have a movie company for the last 15 years, financing documentaries. I finance real estate, apartment buildings, land, you name it. But two people who are a lot smarter than me. One is John Flavin, who's part of CVP, and he was head of real estate finance for what's called the Carr Group and for Gates Capital and a number of big companies in this country. Very savvy guy. He's a lawyer and an MBA in finance. And Rick Harris, who was the principal in charge of transportation finance for Morgan Stanley, managing director of public finance for Dean Witter, and manager of global institutional funds for Putnam for a number of years. His entire career is in public finance. So that's, we have people that can look at this, and there's a brilliant fellow named Peter Ross, who's in San Francisco, which all he does. He's a guy that San Francisco goes to and says, how do we solve this problem? We want to do this, make it work. What's the combination of ways to do that? So let me talk about some of the ways you finance these kind of things, just very high, first glance. First of all, as a public-private partnership with agencies, you have an advantage because when you go to the larger funders that do what we're calling now social venture investing, which means you want to do the right thing and it doesn't make a lot of money, but it makes enough money, there's a great preference for agencies because there's an imprimatur. You're a city. You're you're publicly vetted, that you get first on the list. So there are two forms of finance for this kind of thing that when we're talking large dollars. One is called program-related investments, and the other is called community development finance institutes. And so let me tell you what those are. Foundations realized about 25, 30 years ago that they couldn't have an impact that really mattered by just giving grants. So this was figured out by the big foundations like Ford and Rockefeller and Mellon, where they said, you want to build affordable housing. We're used to giving some small nonprofit $50,000, $100,000, $200,000. You need $25 million. That's a lot of money in a grant that basically you give them the grant and you say, call us and tell us how it went. It's not their model. So the government approved a long time ago something called program-related investments. And that means that a foundation, a nonprofit, can make an investment in your project just like any other investor, even though they're a nonprofit, even though it's their endowment money. But they also have the ability to create any conditions they want. So they did this first for affordable housing. They did it inner city affordable housing. It then moved on to medical device and vaccine research. It's moved now into technology development. Anybody who needs a lot of money, and they get a profit on it. But they have the ability to say, well, if you fail, you don't owe us the money. Or you owe us 2% a year only when you start to make certain money over a certain break even. And if you never make it, we're never going to come after you. I mean, they can do things that nobody else can do. And this is where all the big money comes for affordable housing now. Large-sized urban projects. It comes from this. And the money for that is coming in from insurance companies and other things that are doing socially beneficial investment. So that's one avenue, and there are major foundations that do this, and even in the food area there are major foundations. The other one that's newer is this community development finance institutions and institutes, which is where the government can sanction a for-profit company to make investments that have very kind of different terms than anyone else. And MacArthur has done 300 million of these in the last 15 years. And there's a company called EcoTrust that I know pretty well, so I know that the family that is the Cowans, who were the head of the fund there, and they have $300 million fund to do this, and they fund farms. They fund urban farming. That's one of their areas, so different ones. Rockefeller does it, all the big foundations do this, and there are private capital companies that do this, that have set themselves up. There are hedge funds that have set up these institutes. They get sanctioned by the government, and one of the things that happens when they get sanctioned is they're guaranteed 70% of their losses by the government. So if they make an investment of $100 million, they have a $70 million guarantee from the government, which is an amazing thing. And these kinds of pools of money are more and more happening because there's this move. I mean, Google Foundation went from being a 501c3, which is what we are, to saying we're not going to even be registered. They dropped their registration. They are a private, do-for-good foundation with billions of dollars, but they don't even want the paperwork because they don't care if they make money anyway on it. It just doesn't matter to them. So there are new areas of money, and even the USDA has a program now where they will fund something called a food hub. Now, you know, the Obama administration started a thing called innovation hubs, which is for inner cities when they want to bring certain industry there, whatever. The USDA has something called Food Hub, which is a grant that they make for urban farming, for food services are growing. Now, they wanted to serve underserved communities. They wanted to serve, to build the strength of small local growers. In other words, it's about who benefits, how do they compete. And, you know, as kind of romantic as organic farming sounds, it's a very tough business. And it's very hard to make a living and any help that can be given. So I think the point I want to make without getting into too much detail is that there are all kinds of pieces to doing this. On top of that, there are corporate sponsorships and there are corporate promotional things. For instance, we've got one of our partners at CDP is a fellow named Burton Miller. Well, Burton Miller is a principal in Hornbrother and Worstel, and they're a large international planning firm. And he's willing to do this pro bono going in, to do the planning, his firm, because they live here, because they want to see it happen. When you're a nonprofit, you know, in real estate they say always be closing. Well, in nonprofits it's always be fundraising. It's always be begging. So, you know, when we're not proud, if somebody owns a big firm and they're interested in doing this stuff for free, that's great. All of that goes to reducing the costs for us. Because, and the last thing I'll say about the PCBs is that I believe that it is easier to get the money to remediate the PCBs in the context of a great idea, because it just becomes another cost. Let's face it, it's not the end of the world, it's a cost item. But the story that you have to have has to be a good enough story and a good enough idea for people to go, we understand that's a cost, but you've saved so much money by having free architecture here and free this and free that, and you know, Bon Appetit has thrown in their relationship and they've brought this, that they say, well, it's a cost, you know, and we understand it. We know you're going to need $15 million anyway, so it's part of that, and you've already saved that. When we do grant applications, and I've done hundreds of grant applications for my nonprofits, we always put in one column of real dollars and one column of what we've contributed in time and money and pro bono in another. Just to show the funders that we're asking for $50,000 and we've already got $150,000 in of people's professional time or what they've given in things. And it matters, it matters. So I have an optimistic view about this in that this is a growing space, not a reducing space. In other words, the amount of funding for these kinds of ideas, innovative new development that, you know, I'm proud to say, all the community groups that were against the Larkspur landing plan, I've shown this to you before, and they're all supportive of it. And that matters. Community support matters. And it means that some of those people will will make connections for us. Some of these people are very wealthy, some of these people work in financial advisory firms, and, you know, that's our lifeline. So I think that, you know, that's it, and if you have questions about the project, oh, I just want to say something about Bon Appetit, which I think is particularly kind of cool, is that Bon Appetit, if you go to AT&T Park, to a ball game, there's now an organic farm in the ballpark. In the back, in center field, there's a restaurant, an organic farm. They did that. That's their operation there to promote, that's out of their foundation, to promote awareness about organic food. And I think urban farming is actually going to be, it already is, but it's going to be one of the biggest movements we're going to see across the country. It just makes so much sense. If you look at all the rooftops in the world that are doing nothing, you know, they either should be making energy or growing food. So anyway, thank you. That's what I wanted to say. And if you have any questions of me, we would like to obviously be that long-term use to be on the table to talk about.
What was, you said 2 forms of finance, and I couldn't type that fast. What was, I got program-related investments.
Program-related
What was the
investments
second one?
by foundations, and the other one is called Community Development Finance Institutes. You can Google either of those and you'll see. And actually, if you Google either of those and put urban farming or farming institutes, you start to see some of the people funding that.
You said institutes or institutions.
It's institutes or institutions. The word is kind of interchangeable. I've seen it both ways.
And those funds are guaranteed by the federal government up to 70%?
Up to 70%, not always, but up to 70%.
I see.
And, you know, it started for things like, to be honest, it started for inner city affordable housing, inner city food programs, you know, classes, daycare, and it's expanded out. Yes?
Marilyn Mundy, I'm a resident of Larkspur, and I want to thank you for such a brilliant plan. I want to know what you need from the community.
To help convince the powers that be that we should be at the table for the long-term use. I mean, that's a good question. It's everybody you know, and everybody who knows everybody who knows. To talk about it, write letters, show up at meetings, make your thoughts heard, and it helps. It makes a difference. We're seeing changes. I mean, we're seeing changes with this kind of networked way of new democracy.
So the best thing is to email you and copy Greg Norby on those letters, or?
Yeah, sure,
Okay.
yeah. And if any of you know anybody who supports this concept, now obviously in terms of EPA, I think that, you know, there's a good, I was hoping there was an EIR for the 227 units and the thing that was back there, but I assume it falls under the general plan EIR. You must, at some point, have an EIR for your general plan sometime back in the past, right?
Yeah,
Right.
they, I mean, I'd have to go back to our planning department.
But somewhere back there.
Somewhere back around '05, maybe a little bit before then.
Because EIRs don't actually expire, so the question is this new impact any greater than what was considered in that EIR? And then what's different about the impact? So we're a fairly low impact traffic thing. I mean, in the scheme of things, the housing is what it is, which is separated on top, and then Ross Valley's use is what it is. I don't know, but there may need to be amendment there or supplemental even, whatever's the right thing to do. And that involves ultimately probably amendment to the general plan, or, you know, so I think the 5 years actually, I mean, I'll put it this way, we should start within 2 years from now, you know, in earnest, because, you know, 3 years to get all these pieces lined up, you know, you're the city and they're the owners, so you're the key players.
Yeah, the other thing that's probably separate from that is the land use designation, because this was set up as a planned unit development
Yeah.
and not a specific broad zoning.
Right,
Yeah.
so maybe a de novo hearing on the whole thing. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not gonna commit one way or another, I mean, I don't
No,
know.
I'm guessing too,
You
but
know,
I'm just taking the worst case scenario.
Yeah, I would have, you know, we should present these questions to our planning department.
It's okay with me, either
Yeah.
way.
Yeah,
I know what it is.
I'm not a planner by trade, I don't know how to answer those.
Yeah, no, it's okay, it's okay.
As you're talking about the senior units, do you have any kind of number?
About 35, it would probably fit there. I mean, somewhere between 30 and 40 probably would fit there comfortably.
Are they apartments
Terms
or
of-
actual dwellings?
Have a good point. Excuse me?
Are they apartments or dwellings?
It would probably be a kind of they could be for sale, or they could be condo or a combination, but they'd probably be some kind of either townhouse or apartment. But not apartment like stacked apartment, but more like 2 levels of apartment. Kind of.
But these would be rental units, not for sale units.
Well, I don't know.
Oh, okay.
You know, that's a question. I mean, I really look at the housing piece as a somewhat kind of separate development, even to the point that if Ross Valley Center District wanted to commit to the long-term use of that upper bench, they could do a subdivision and sell it. I mean, they could simply capitalize out and say, hey, we want the money, we'll take the money for that, we still own almost, 4/5 of the property, three-quarters of the property, and we'll just sell it off. And then it's financed like any other thing, it has all the same challenges and problems of any housing. I don't see any cross-collateralization between the financing of the housing and the farm, right? And they're kind of separate anyway, because they're different lenders.
The interim training housing, that would be company owned.
That would be company owned. That would be about 10, 12 units, very small, more like kind of dorm kind of things, but, it would really, it's interim. It's for people that are coming there to the educational center to work, learn for 6 months, let's say, on a program. And they can be coming from wherever, and I think we can qualify, but it is interesting. I think in that case, we can actually qualify that they are only Marin residents. If it's for sale housing or rental housing, it's different, but if it's owned part of a facility, like employee housing owned, I think you can actually, I'd have to check into that, maybe able to limit it to people from a certain area, Napa, Sonoma, Marin or something.
So I have a question around grants to help us clean up our PCDs. Do you have any information on that? Is that
Well,
a possibility?
as I say, yes, there are funds for that, and mostly federal funds and state funds, and I think my way of looking at it is in the context of what we're doing, can they help us with this piece, rather than going out as the lead question? Instead of going out and saying, all I want to do is do
Right.
these PCBs, and it's like, well, we've got a lot of people that have problems, where do you stand in line? It's a matter of having natural allies that are writing those endorsement letters saying, we want this project, we want this, we want that, and this PCB thing is prerequisite to do it. And this is a technique, to be honest, that when I've been in the documentary film finance business, this is arguably the worst business in the world. Real estate business finance is great, because you go out and you've got property, and you say, people will be paying rent, and they'll be using the laundry, and it's like, but when you finance a film, you're going to somebody and say, this is a really stupid investment, you're gonna lose all your money, but it's a great film. So no one wants to do it, and the only way you finance it is with this long pile of endorsements that say, Sierra Club says people should see this, the Environmental Defense Fund says people should see this, or whoever it is, Whole Foods says you should see this. That starts to add up because the funders go, well, that means at least those people will see it. So it's the same thing here, I think we've got, but I think it is, even to the point, I'll put it this way, this whole thing could be, the farm could be put into an L3C, a for-profit entity controlled by a nonprofit entity. In other words, we can have a nonprofit parent with RVSD board members on the board of that nonprofit parent entity. I've done this deal before. And then you have a for-profit entity that you are the controlling board members, but you have for-profit investors. And their money pays for it, but they get preferential revenue. And this I've done. So there's a lot of ways. I'm just trying to say, there's a lot of ways.
Well, I was, just a few comments. One would be, I think it's just so much irony that we would be considering converting the PCD site into an organic farm. I mean, it's laughable, Marin, I think it's like over the top fantastic, if you even think about that. The other part, though, going through all of what Larkspur's been going through as far as development is concerned, I mean, before the Rose Lane situation, when it was final and done, there were commitments of individual community members that really wanted a farm there.
So there was a proposal for a farm.
Right, so that, you know, that, I mean, our city knows that that exists as far as interest. So there is community interest in that direction, it's been exposed before. And then during our, you know, SAP situations that we were going on, senior housing was another one of those topics that we, you know, it's really hard to fund. We just had that discussion, I think, recently over at Greenbrae, with those 90 units and that sort of thing. You know, to get investors in there and do that sort of thing, it really takes the right combination.
Sure.
What you're proposing sounds very quality-like as
Yeah.
far as, you know,
This is
placement,
what-
and we have already seen the reports at the city level that that's the direction, you know, our community is growing, because we are living longer and we love what we are here and don't really want to move out of here.
Age in place.
Yes, exactly. So, you know, this has all those nice components to it, and maybe Catherine or Larry can speak to the solidity of what this proposal has by what you've been hearing from the community. Does it seem to meet the mark?
This is the first time I've heard this. You know, I mean, I'm not even gonna pretend that I have a comment tonight.
Okay.
Yeah, I agree. It's the first time I've heard it also.
That's fair. Yes.
We need places that are mixed generation, and what I'm hearing from this, it's mixed generation,
Yep.
it's mixed purpose, and
Yep.
I want that for myself, I want that for my son, I want that for all the ages as we are aging and dealing with a lot more of the older population. It's so healthy
Well,
and awesome.
I agree. See, I think that, you know, what I call the active elderly now, which is, people just don't get old and move to the redwoods, you know, they have like 20 years.
Except the redwoods are here.
The redwoods, we're really glad we're here, but the point is that you have these years where you don't have kids around anymore, you're not exactly running Ironmans anymore, but you want to be really doing something. I envision a lot of the people in the senior housing to want to be volunteers working at the farm just to do it. You know, just because it's a great place.
Yeah, I don't want to squelch anybody else's expression of their views of what this project is like, and you know, I'm happy to hear what other people think, but I have a lot of problems with this whole idea. One of the first ones is that I don't think the management and the board of the Ross Valley Sanitary District has the expertise to run this kind of operation.
They wouldn't run.
Well, but they would ultimately be responsible for a lot of it. And they would have to make sure that whoever is running it has the right kind of qualifications and can manage it.
Absolutely.
That's just the first level on which I have a problem with this. Another level on which I have a problem with this is that, as far as I'm concerned, organic food has to pay its own way. If you want to eat organic food, it's okay with me. I'm not buying it. And I don't want my tax dollars supporting
Your
that
tax dollars, there's no tax dollars involved.
Oh, everything you talked about is tax
No,
dollars.
tell me what's.
When you talked about the financing of these projects,
Right.
the federal government is the supporter of last resort for everything you're talking about. The saving.
I'm sorry, not everything, just one
Oh,
program. in
okay,
certain
just one
situations.
program. The biggest program that draws money out of this is going to be supported by the federal government. And who knows how much it's going to run up. We don't know. And, you know, and I've just gotten started. I really don't believe that this makes a whole lot of sense for the Ross Valley Sanitary District.
What would you propose Ross Valley do?
You know,
Excuse me, Bob, just curious, let me just, did I miss your name?
Oh, I'm sorry, Laura Effel.
Okay.
A lot of people here already know my name, but I did need to do that. Thank you for reminding me.
And so, Bob got to ask the question, what's your idea of what ought to be?
Well, I am
So
delighted
that's why
that
we're having
somebody
this
wants
meeting.
to pay for the remediation, because we know it has to be done. Whatever else the Ross Valley Sanitary District does with its property, it has to be remediated, or it's just not going to be used. You can't sell it. We already know that from the lawsuit, where you ended up having to take the property back. It's got to be remediated, no question about that. It's an important consideration. Now, it seems to me that whatever you do with this property, it should be in keeping with the mission of the Ross Valley Sanitary District. I do think that you've made one really good point about keeping the property in the Ross Valley Sanitary District, because it's only going to be more valuable assuming that it gets cleaned up. It's not going to, if we sell it off, that asset is gone. Or if you sell out large portions of it. And land just doesn't get cheaper. That's not what happens with it. And it's an asset that ought to be used for the benefit of the district. Specifically, what ought to be done with it, I haven't got a plan, but I do have some problems with this one, and that's my opinion.
I guess, I would respond a little bit to what you're saying. I think that you're bringing up some valid concerns, about first of all, I really like the idea overall. I'm very attracted to it. And there's two aspects to it in a certain way from my point of view. There's the value of your plan and your vision that you're proposing, which I take as sort of a beginning vision of sort of where to start in terms of how to think about this and what it could be and how financing might come together and so on. But there's the value to the community in terms of what it would represent, in terms of being a place that represents and new, really what has to happen in the future, sort of where we're moving towards. And then there's the value in terms of paying the bills. Where does the ongoing money come from that's going to go to the sort of the brass tacks issues that you're talking about? She says organic food has to pay its own way.
It will.
Okay.
It does. Whole Foods is one of the most profitable companies in this country.
Right. And that, to me, that's where your concerns get worked out. I have nothing at all against the idea of this going forward if it's, and it should meet everybody's expectation in terms of if it's really going to be an ongoing source of income, the income has to come from somewhere and not sequential grants and so on. And those things potentially can be worked out, and then it can be assessed. Is this potentially real or not? But assuming that it's appropriate to do something that's been done 100 times before, which those don't necessarily work out either. They can fail financially.
They do all the time.
They do, yeah. I'm in the investment world myself. I'm a financial advisor. I watch what's going on in the financial system. It is so absurd. Our entire financial system is an experiment in progress. And I personally don't think it's going to end well. And so, the idea that we should approach it in the traditional solutions are what we need is really not where it's at.
Well, if I could just say, I thank you for saying that, but I get up every day doing this, and I don't get paid. CDP doesn't pay me. I do this for free, 24/7 every day. And I'm committed to do that for at least another year. And even then, maybe I'll get $1 an hour. But the reality is, I think that we have to start to demonstrate better ways to do things. And whatever it takes to demonstrate them to the community, to the world, to the city, to the structure of money to everybody, that there are ways. And we've got a couple projects like this that are coming down the pipe. You know, we're working with ABAG of all people, which they're presenting to their board this week on a computerized cloud application to bring all the data together about all the 109 entities and to be able to finally see what these cities actually want and what the people in these cities want, and be able to compare the databases, compare it to the plan, and say, gee, the plan doesn't match what the cities want at all, and then know why. In other words, if we don't start to demonstrate solutions to these things, then I agree with you. When I look at the way we're doing things, more of the same, you know? I mean, I had lunch with this guy named Bill Haroff. He was the California Banking Commissioner. He sat in the room with Bernanke and Paulson and representing California. And I said to him, so what happened in 2008? And he said, well, he said, we had a real problem in 2008. We had too few people controlling too much money. But we fixed that. Now we've got half as many people controlling twice as much money.
So, if you're talking about the Ross Valley, did you vision an income stream? So, the question is, what's the benefit for the taxpayers of Ross Valley? I guess one would be, the PCBs would be removed to the site, and it would be a cost that the taxpayers of Ross Valley would not have to burden, carry.
Exactly, it's a cost of the deal. It's got to be paid for somehow out of the deal.
That's part of it. But I mean, the taxpayers of Ross Valley Sanitary District are not going to be paying for the removal.
No, there won't be any special assessment, there won't be, it can't go to that level. In other words, it has to come out of the numbers of what makes the deal work, the values that are there, the values of the revenue stream. So you have a lease arrangement, unless you, like I say, decide to sell off land for housing, 2 acres or an acre and a half. But you have a lease arrangement, like any other lease. And you have conditions in that lease that say what the leasee has to
Do you
do.
envision an annual revenue stream for?
Well, there's a revenue stream and there's conditions that say you're responsible for this, you're responsible for this. It's like renting an apartment to somebody, you know, you can't do this, you can't do that, otherwise you've broken your lease and you've got a problem. And so, like any other lease arrangement, it's a land lease. You know, all of Hawaii is land leases. Nobody owns anything in Hawaii. They don't own their land. In Mexico, my friend just built a house on the coast of Mexico. He doesn't own the land. He's got a 99-year lease. He built himself a house on it. I mean, a lot of places just operate on leases. And so a lease is a dependable and a financeable revenue stream for Ross Valley. In other words, if you go to a lender and say, we not only own this asset, but it has a revenue stream of X dollars a year. And we've got a certain situation, so we need a loan. Of course, we had a whole thing blow up over here. It went underwater and the pipes are wrecking. We don't have the $2 million we need. You know, it's like getting a home equity loan. It's like saying we want the money. In other words, it gives you flexibility financially the same way as if you do a parking lot and you get some of the revenue from a parking lot. It's revenue, right? You have own the land and you're getting revenue. So the question is, how much is enough to satisfy Ross Valley?
Yes, Robert Milton is my name. I think this is an inappropriate idea. I'd like to address the board and not you, although I want to thank you very much for your help in dealing with the Larkspur Landing project. It was a terrible idea, and we got the city council of Larkspur was very wise in turning it.
They were very wise.
Okay, so as far as the Ross Valley Sanitary District goes, there are 2 issues. One, this is a major piece of property in an area that all of us, let's just say the Ross Valley, has as a key transportation problem. We've got a big issue over there. This idea could be done anywhere in the county. This seems really odd to be putting it right in the center of the biggest traffic jam we have. Secondly, again, with due respect to the district personnel and management, I'm a food manufacturer, I'm in the agricultural business. You really don't know anything about the food industry or agriculture or even hydroponic growing, much less. It's a high cost industry to be in, huge amount of government oversight. If you have a problem with infection in your hydroponic tanks, it gets on the food, you're really going to be liable for a lot of problems, just like the Costco people were when they got salmonella on their spinach. Mr. Silvestri is a very accomplished presenter of this idea, but I suspect you don't know anything about hydroponic growing either.
Can I address what you're saying, because if you're gonna talk.
Well, let's
And as far as the margins go, Whole Foods makes a lot of money. If you look at the organic food business does not represent the vast majority of the Marin buyers. It's an acute idea. Some people are crazy about it. Most people don't really depend on it. So it just seems inappropriate for that piece of property. It could be done anywhere in Marin County. This is a major, it's sort of like the bicycle lane on the Richmond Bridge. It's a nice idea. While people are waiting in line to get over the other side of the bridge, the bicycle interests are saying, we want our bicycle lane. While that farm is over there growing organic spinach or whatever, people are looking for parking places at Larkspur Landing. That's the interest that most people are gonna have in your district, what to do over there with their cars.
In discussing organics and the value and our people buying organics in Marin,
It's a specialized interest, not the one that represents
But-
everybody's food use.
Fairfax used to have a Lucky Store there, and it closed, was shut down for a number of years, and Good Earth Natural Food Store went and opened up basically an organic food store there. The numbers are unbelievable. Their customer base is all over Marin County and Sonoma County, driving to Good Earth Natural Food Store to shop.
That's
No,
fine.
The
You
traffic
you
impacts-
guys are in the sanitary district business though. not
Traffic
in the food
impacts on
business.
Fairfax are huge, but the popularity of the organic movement is.
But that's not the business you guys are in.
Well, I think, what we're talking about, is this proposal a
Don't-
long-term solution? Does it have legs? Would it really work?
Well,
And
there'd be a lot of other
I'm not
potential
saying it's
ideas.
gonna work
No.
or not work,
Can I
but.
just clarify something, because this is like off, this isn't really the right conversation. If you owned an office building, okay? You owned a warehouse building, got 15 mini warehouses in it, you own an office building, it's got 25 offices. Are you in the business of all the people you lease to? Are you liable for what they do?
No, as long as they pay the rent, I guess we're okay.
No, that's what a lease contract is. A lease contract says, it, as the terms that say, so you don't care if the spinach dies and gets rotted. That doesn't have anything to do with you. The person has to pay their rent. They have to pay their lease. That's the terms. If they don't, you foreclose on them, you kick them out, you sell their lease to somebody else. I'm willing to take that risk. That's what I'm saying. You have no risk whatsoever. So the argument you bring up is not appropriate, because they're not going into any business, no different than if I own an office building or I rent an apartment building that I own to 15 families. I don't get involved in their lives. All they have to do is pay the rent. That's all they have to do. That's all I have to do. My part of the bargain. They have no liability, no operational liability, no financial liability.
Okay, that's good.
Okay, I'm just saying. So I mean, I don't want people to get upset about something. I'm not asking for anything.
No, but people need to voice whatever fear or
Absolutely.
concern they have,
Absolutely.
and that's why we're here tonight.
So
All right, Laura Ethel again.
Yeah.
I'd like to introduce the concept of underwriting. When a bank forecloses on somebody who didn't pay whatever it was they were supposed to pay on their loan, they may suddenly own a business. And the first thing they do is try to get out of it. They want to sell the property. They want to get out
But they're not
whatever
gonna-
business.
We're off topic, I think,
Well, they're not gonna own the property.
Well,
So the bank's
but
not
what
gonna
I'm saying is,
foreclose.
when you undertake to lease or make an arrangement with somebody who's gonna have a completely unrelated business on your property, you need to be able to assess the viability of that business. And the risk that you're taking, that they're gonna fail. Now, you don't have to be a complete expert in the business that they're proposing to put on your property. But you'd have to know enough to assess that risk and to make a judgment that makes sense. And as far as I can tell, and it's no disrespect to anybody at the Ross Valley Sanitary District, you don't have that expertise.
We hear you, totally, I hear you. Yeah, I got it. Thank you.
So we're just a few minutes over here. Pam, I don't know if we can come to any kind of conclusion at all tonight. I mean, I think we had an airing of these.
I still
I'd like to make
issues.
just one statement because I love the idea. I think it's a great idea and I hear what you're saying too. I really, really do. But what we heard at the beginning here was a nebulous plan of, well, we don't need to do the PCBs, we'll just cover them up. And then we hear that it's really a really bad idea because it's going to go into the bay. And then, you know, surprisingly, how EPA would even say that was a good idea is so questionable.
They're saying only interim, but.
Well, there you
phase
go,
one,
and
phase
that's
one.
my point. If everything is interim, why wait 5 years to do nothing? When there's a good plan that could have legs to do something better. And whether it's that plan or, you know, whether that plan could be done up, you know, Sonoma County or somewhere else, I mean, it certainly could. But it's a plan, and there isn't another plan that, because what I see is if that land does need to be fixed, it's gonna cost the taxpayers some money, and you guys aren't gonna like that. Taxpayers are, I'm one of those.
All of us are not gonna like it.
Right, but what's gonna happen then? Ross Valley might have to sell that land and might go to one of those nasty developers who tried to ruin it before, and thank goodness Larkspur didn't do that. But, you know, in 5 years, maybe those things will change and they end up putting all this housing up there that
Okay.
really upset everyone.
Okay, so so far, this is what Ross Valley has into this land. Once they dismantle the sewer treatment plant and joined up with Central Sanitation Agency, and then we moved out and moved to the location. The settlement agreement with Campus was $4.75 million cash money out of our public's coffers. It was paid over 3 years. It's part of the settlement. The legal defense for the lawsuit, that went on for years and years and years, long before Pam and I came on board.
10 years.
$1.6 million. So we've got $6.35 million in the land, not counting any time, effort, or any of the studies we've done. That's how much we've got in mind. That's what the toxics have cost us on that property so far.
And there's no revenue stream except taxes. Right.
And if we're gonna remove it, and I think we do, it could be up to another $5 million. So that means we're gonna have over $11 million invested in this land of taxpayer money.
That's kind of my point too.
That's a lot of
your
money.
point, right?
Well, and so.
Let's have a solution.
One of the important or key factors of this proposal is that cost to remove the PCBs and take them out, send them to the proper landfill, would not be borne by the taxpayers of the Ross Valley Sanitary District, at least up front. You know, I mean, I guess it would have to be factored in the long-term lease arrangement of something like that.
Well, and Bob mentioned that, you know, federal monies can come in to do that if there's an adequate plan. And, you know, having a plan,
And that will take time.
well, it's all gonna take time.
Yeah, and
So,
so.
I mean, what you're talking about before was
We're
gonna take
we're
5
here,
years, so.
And that's why we're talking about this interim plan.
Well, I just wanted to say thank you for letting me have this opportunity to talk to you guys.
Okay, well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for the presentation. And, you know, hopefully the public is going to now become informed that this agency is looking at all the options. And we're going to have, the next meeting is December 17th. It's going to be on the agenda again. And I'm not sure what we're going to tell the board. I don't think we're going to have a specific recommendation. I think we get a report out as to what we heard tonight, the pros and the cons, and the issues that were discussed. And we'll go from there. So thank you very much. So thank you for coming.
Thank you.